You've had a good break. It's time to try and get into a little bit more of the motivation. You'll see on the screen we've got the book that we're working from, and we'll be finalizing um, some more motivational theories. Now, motivational theories in chapter 11 is broken out down basically into seven different theories. Okay, I've got my book here because I want to find out more or less where this chapter is or this page. We typically on page 140. There's McGregor's theory, that's the first one. Let me quickly shoot through. We did this last time. McGregor's theory X is people dislike work, they'll avoid responsibility, and they're not creative. That's what managers believe about employees. Theory Y is that managers believe employees are, this is now on the Y-axis. Remember that, Y, and the X is the bad stuff, and the Y is the good stuff. So managers believe that workers can derive as much enjoyment from work as they do from rest and play. They do like responsibility, and they're very creative. Right, but we went through that last time, and an informal leader and also emotional intelligence. So building on that theory, what's quite important is the era that those theories came around. Okay, so in your introduction about motivation is, do people only like to be motivated by money? No, there are other things as well. But how do you factor in? So if you look inside a circle, okay, that's not a circle, that's a triangle. But if you look inside a circle and you look, okay, can you know what's inside my head, what I'm thinking, and do you know what's inside my heart, what I'm feeling? No, you can't. So what and how does a manager understand whether an employee is motivated or not? By their productivity? Yeah, that's one way. But more importantly, these factors: 1, absenteeism; 2, lateness; 3, poor performance; 4, accidents; 5, labor turnover, so in other words, there's lots of people coming and going; grievances, there's lots of complaints; and poor response rate. So these are just some indicators of employees or staff that aren't motivated. So go through that in your own time. But motivation in theory can help you manage your business a little bit better. Now, Taylor came up with the scientific approach, and we went through this before around the time of the war and all of that. So there was a lot of industrialization, and people had to work, and they weren't that well educated because why? Because the access to information and education wasn't very forthcoming. And during the wartime, everybody basically worked in the factories to try and earn some bread and some food, but also because that was survival. Everything was around survival. So the scientific approach basically looked at the efficiency of the worker. Okay, how do you improve a worker's productivity? Select workers to perform the task, observe them performing the task, record the time taken for each task, identify the quickest method, record it, then train the workers with the quickest method, and then supervise the workers, ensure the best way is being carried out, and then of course pay the workers based on their result, and pay the workers based on the theory of economic man. So when you hear the word economic man, you must think Taylor's theory or scientific management. Now his theory was pretty strong in terms of the motivation, and at that time was money, but it was more about survival. But Taylor's approach had a few holes in it. But bottom line is, if you broke it down into this table that they've got here: economic man, that's the main motivator; select the right people to do the job, observe them, record the performance, and then establish the best method for the job. So in other words, method study, and then pay them according to the work that they've done. So piecemeal. Okay, very effective way of managing in those times. However, this guy came around, old Mayo, in a little bit after Taylor's theory, and he did a study um, called the Hawthorne effect for about 5 years at this company called Western Electric Company in Chicago. Okay, and then what they did is they experimented like little lab rats, and they changed the lighting, the heating, they had rest periods, didn't have rest periods, and so on. And they checked and monitored what the productivity was like. And they did experiments, obviously, for looking what is the optimum working conditions. This was all good in theory, but the output of the group also recorded a few other startling factors, and that is working conditions in themselves were not important in determining the productivity levels. Other motivating factors had to be investigated before conclusions were drawn. And what were they? Subsequently, experiments carried out with the group was on an assembly line, so changes in rest periods. So in other words, you're on this productivity line, you're packing or you sawing or you're cutting or whatever you're doing, but you needed to rest, and that was important just as much as the pay, but just as much as that is the pay. So the working conditions had to be important. The changes to rest period, also the pay system has to be incorporated. So the higher the output, the better the pay should be effectively. Assembly bench layout was important. So in other words, to do multitasking or to have a different flow rate, etc. And of course, canteen food were made available according to a bonus of 12-week intervals. So before any major change was done, the researchers discussed the new changes in the workforce. At the end of the experiment, the working conditions and hours were returned to how they were before the start of the trial. And then suddenly the output rose. So that said that the workers were motivated because they were able to work more effectively and more productively. So the conclusions of their study was, and Mayo I call the humanistic approach. In this book it's called the human relations theory. So the Hawthorne effect conclusions were: changes in working conditions and financial rewards have little or no effect on productivity. So lighting, air conditioning, etc. When management consulted the workers to take an interest in their work, the motivation was improved. Working in teams developed a team spirit, and that also improved productivity. And then when some control over their own working lives was given to the workers, such as how and when to take breaks, created a positive effect. And then groups could be established their own targets and norms. That also, so in other words, they are able to set their own targets, so they were able to set whether they wanted to agree with the targets or exceed the targets that management put down. The book goes on further to evaluate Mayo's research for today's business, and it says here that since Mayo's findings were published, there's been a trend towards more workers playing a role in business and the decision making. This is called participation. So just like everybody here that's participating in this discussion, that's what workers want to be able to do. Right. So personnel departments, which hardly existed in those years, were established to try and put the Hawthorne effect into practice. Team working, group working can be applied in many types of modern businesses, and these offer great opportunities for workers and firms to benefit from the Hawthorne effect. The idea of involving workers taking an interest in their welfare, very important, taking an interest in their welfare and finding their individual goals has opened up new fields of research in individual psychologists in this field of study. And most universities study this in more depth. And they call this development of the people side of the business, not the Taylor scientific. So we've got theory 1 was McGregor, theory 2 was Taylor, and then theory 3 is Mayo, the people side or humanistic side. Okay, then further on to this, they built on this theory was Maslow. Maslow's hierarchy of needs was pretty straightforward. It was quite earth-shattering in many fields of study, from psychology to business to even biology, and they all really study this in depth. So the physical needs have to be met in order for an employee or an individual to be motivated. Physical needs cover food, shelter, water, and rest. Okay, so income through employment have to be high enough. So in other words, they must be paid high enough in order for them to meet their essential needs, be able to buy food, afford a shelter, have water, and to be able to rest. Safety needs were the second layer, and that was protection from threats, job security, health, and safety at work. What does that mean in business? Safety needs is contract of employment with some sort of job security, a structured organization that gives clear lines of authority to reduce uncertainty, ensuring health safety conditions are met. Pretty straightforward. Social needs on a completely different level. Social needs is requiring trust, acceptance, friendship, belonging to a group, social facilities. And working in teams and groups ensures that communication to make workers feel very involved. That's how Maslow's theory of needs works in business. Then esteem needs respect from others and status in the business, recognition of achievement. So recognition of work well done, status and advancement, supervisor, manager, key workers, etc. And responsibility, giving more responsibility and respect to others, helps meet the basic social needs. The esteem needs, however, is something else. That's recognition of work well done, status. I'm going to have to edit that.